Let's go to the first day of Genesis chapter 1. And Elohim saw the light, that it was good, and Elohim divided the light from the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And evening and morning were the first day. So it's Genesis 1, 4 through 5. So it is interesting that both sides of the debate use these verses to justify their point. It becomes a game of linguistical gymnastics, but nevertheless, let's take a look. Reading the Hebrew interlinear itself, the translation into English is correct. So here's the interlinear. It says, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. So we'll break this down a little bit further in just a second. So following the pattern, we first saw in the creation account darkness first, then light. No lengthy explanations needed. Some would say, and then there was evening and morning, implying that something came before the evening. This just doesn't happen in the Hebrew. And they get this because some of the translations actually say that, and then there was evening and then there was morning. But the Hebrew doesn't say that. So let's take a look. So this is what it would look like for and then there was. So just in case I'm going a little fast, which I have a lot to cover. So if I do go fast, I apologize. But again, you can always go back to the article and read it at your pace. So what I'm getting ready to show you here is the Hebrew just simply says, and there was evening and there was morning. It does not say, and then there was evening and then there was morning. So if the Hebrew were to say, and then there was, it would be ve'az haya. So this says ve'az haya, and then there was. So the Hebrew would read ve'az haya, whereas it simply is v'chaya, which is two different. Ve'az haya and v'chaya are two different things. So v'chaya, right here, v'chaya, and there was. So the translators got this one right. So by someone saying, and then there was evening and then there was light, they're adding to the Hebrew. The Hebrew does not say that because, again, it would say ve'az haya, but it doesn't say that. It just says v'chaya. It's two different things. So remember, so this is and there was evening. So before we continue, we need to establish one important matter. In the Hebrew, yom can be defined as the daylight hours of I wrote this wrong. In the Hebrew, yom can be defined as the daylight hours of a 24-hour day. So just the light portion. So yom could be the hours of the sun, which, it depends on what season you're in, but let's just call it 12 hours. Let's say we're at the equinox and you got half day and half night. So yom can be defined as that 12-hour period of a 24-hour day. Yom can also be used to define or express an entire day or a 24-hour period, so consisting of night and day. This, I believe, is where much of the confusion is rooted, but we will expound on this a little bit later. So I just want to set the precedence that yom can mean daylight hours or a 24-hour period, either one.
Okay, I agree with everything you've said so far, almost everything. Let's go back here for a second, and I wanted to touch on this point here, the first one. Okay, maybe it was your second point, but so I wanted to point out here that in the original Hebrew, there's no punctuation, so there's no period or end of sentence here, where that might not be a period, that might be some punctuation there. But these are not two different sentences. This is the same thought. There's no sentence breaks. The way I read it, following this grammar here, I'll show it here in just a second. The way I read it is that the first things happen first. There's darkness first, then he creates light, starting at the yom portion of the day, and I'll show you a graphic to try to explain this point. Then he creates light when yom starts, and there's light. The light lasted all day until darkness came, which he called night. And then there was evening, and then there was morning, day the first. So there's one thing happening after another. In the morning, he creates light. Then he names the light day, and then evening comes, and the darkness comes, and he separates, makes the separation, and then he names the darkness night. And then Erev comes, the evening, and then morning comes, Boker, and that signals the end of the first day. So that would be the full sentence there. So let me show you this publication here real quick. Okay, I want to highlight part of this publication here. To express consecutive narration in the past, the first verb is in the perfect, completed action or its equivalent, and all of the following verbs are in the imperfect and prefixed with vav. This narrative device is called the vav consecutive imperfect. So this is what I'm trying to say is the grammar here that's used in Genesis 1. So because it's a consecutive narration of things that happened in the past, the first verb here, created, this bara, is there's no vav here, but then all of the other verbs here are going to be, they're going to have a vav in them. So the vav is going to be conjoining these things to the first part of the sentence because the sentence isn't over. So if we jump down to verse 5, which is the one you're showing, it says uh, in the first Yom, the day, the light he called Yom, and the darkness Lila, at night. So um, it says here's what you were saying. The Viahi, um, there's the vav there because it's and there was, and it's conjoining. The sentence hasn't ended. We're continuing the thought. He created day, or he named the light day, and he named the darkness night here. Um, and there was evening, and there was morning, boker, yom, the first day. So if I go back to your example here, you're saying that in the English translations, when it says "and then there was," is not correct because the Hebrew would have this word viaz haya, so it would be viaz haya instead of just vaya. So my answer to this would be that the reason that this is written this way is because grammatically it's not the end of the sentence. There's more things that happened when he created. He named the day Yom, and he named the night Lila, and there was evening, and there was morning the first day. That's why all the vavs. It's the reason for them. Um, so, in my opinion, the English that says "and then there was" is only clarifying what is written there in the Hebrew, um, and that you don't need this extra word to say exactly what was said because of this vav consecutive imperfect narrative device. Okay, I want to show you my graphic next, but before I can do that, I just want to explain where I got the information. So let's do verse 10. Let the children of Israel observe the Passover on the day of its fixed time, on the 14th day of the first month, between the evenings, from the third part of the day to the third part of the night. For 2 portions of the day are given to the night, and the third part to the evening. That is that which Yahuwah commanded you, that you should observe it between the evenings. So these 3 verses are what led me to put together this graphic. So in Enoch chapter 71, verse 25, it says, At that period, the day is made equal with the night, and being equal with it, the night becomes 9 parts, and the day becomes 9 parts. And if you read elsewhere in Enoch, um, around chapter 71, right in that area, he describes basically our equinoxes and solstices, uh, and how the nights and days lengthen and shorten throughout the year. So you can see here I have the day divided into 3 parts. This third part here is what the angel had said. This is the third part of the day that has been given to the evening. So this third part, the title of this is Areb, which means evening, and this is the transitionary period between daylight and darkness. In the summer, this point happens later in the day, and then in the winter, at least in the north, this happens earlier. So the equinox would be the easiest point to reference here, just because things can be pretty symmetrical at this moment. Um, so here I have 2 days that are the equinox, but I have them back to back, and that's just to show the beginnings and the ends of the days. Um, and you'll see that I have the day shown here beginning at the third part of the night, which I think the scripture shows is called Boker, um, and that this is the starting point of the day, and that this is also a period that seems to change depending on uh, whether you're in the winter or the summer. And and so let me jump back over here and read verse 12 to kind of to show some more. So it says, "It is not permissible to slay the Passover during any period of the light, but during the period bordering on the evening, and let them eat it at the time of the evening until the third part of the night. And whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night onwards, let them burn it with fire." So I added a slide here real quick. I wanted to compare that verse 12 with Exodus chapter 12, verse 10. So 12, verse 10 says that you shall let none of it, the Passover, remain until morning, and whatever remains until morning, you shall burn with fire. And if you look here in the Hebrew, this morning word is boker. This is the part where you're not allowed to eat the Passover, and the angel in verse 12 of Jubilees 49 says that the third part of the night is the part where, if there's any flesh left over, burn it. Right? So the third part of the night is Boker. And Boker is the beginning and ending part of the day. Now, I want to touch on uh, the precedents in Scripture on when the days begin and when Sabbaths begin and end. And I know that this is a point where I lose a lot of people because they just don't agree with this point, but I feel that this is what the scriptures are saying, and if you would read it this way, it would make sense. I feel like it does. All of these verses for when does the day begin, they all seem to fit within what I have represented in this graphic here. So the precedence so the precedence is set by Enoch. So the precedence is so the precedence is set. So the precedence is set by Enoch. So the precedence for this is set by Enoch, since it says in the book of Enoch that Enoch was the first man to write. So when Enoch records the movements of the luminaries by the angels, he's the first one to do so, and whatever measure that he's using is the original one, and whatever. So what I'm trying to say is the precedence is set in Enoch, and what's written there is expounded upon later in Jubilees, and then repeated for us in Exodus and Deuteronomy and other places, um, clarifying the precedence that was set. So Enoch is talking about days and when they begin and end, and how seasons work, and in describing a year. Uh, um, and Exodus specifically, Leviticus 23 um, is describing Sabbath days and appointed times. Appointed times happen at whatever time was appointed, and that time doesn't have to be an entire day. Or so it's perfectly fine if Yahuwah decides that he's going to have an appointed time. His feast is going to begin on the evening of the 14th, and then that's Passover, and it lasts till the end of the day, but it begins there on the evening. And then when it gets to Boker, which will be the morning of the 15th, you begin the next day, but that we're continuing on in the Sabbath feast because this is the first day of unleavened bread. And so, as the angel says, it's the beginning of the joy. How does he say it? Um, he says, "For on this night, the beginning of the festival and the beginning of the joy, you were eating the Passover." So it's Passover is a Sabbath, and then unleavened bread is a Sabbath, but they're back to back, and there's no break in between. So you begin the joy and the festival on the night before it even begins, because you started with Passover and you didn't start with unleavened bread. So the same thing is described later in Leviticus 23 for atonement. And atonement starts in the evening as well, and it's if that appointed time goes from evening to the next evening, um, because that's what the appointments, the feasts are all describing future prophetic events, right? So some of them, like the Passover, we have Exodus as a historical marker to look at, and a historical example to look at. Um, but but atonement is what I perceive atonement is the the feast commemorating the appointed time that is Judgment Day, when Yahuwah actually has the judgments, which hasn't happened yet. I mean, I guess it happened during before the flood, because there was a judgment poured out there, and perhaps another one happened at um, Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe this is when Yahuwah regularly makes his judgments, but that's but it's up to Yahuwah when he wants to do things. But for his appointed times that he has set for himself, that he is sharing with us, they don't necessarily have to line up with exactly when days begin and end. Um, and so the feasts are, in my opinion, appointed times that start when they start and end when they end, and they're described. And if there's no description given to us that would lead us to deviate from the precedence that was set that days begin at the boker, at the morning, at the third part of the night, and the next day would begin at the same time the next day, unless we have some marker that says, hey, don't follow the normal plan. This one, let's not start there, but let's start at the evening of the day, like on on Passover. So the Sabbath day is different from the other feasts, but it itself is also a feast. It's a Sabbath. Of course, it's a Sabbath. And the appointed time for the weekly Sabbath is an entire day. It's the seventh day was set apart to be a Sabbath unto itself for man. So each Sabbath is explained to us in Leviticus one by one, starting with the seventh day Sabbath and then going on to the annual feasts. And we're given instruction when those feasts begin at a time other than the time we would normally begin things at the beginning of a day. And every time it deviates, it's said there. And you'll read through Leviticus and see, oh, look, Passover here, and again down here. And I'll go up on this. I'll bring up this verse where people want to bring up the Septuagint and look at the English translation of the Greek Septuagint and say that it's the Sabbaths is plural here for atonement. Um, in the Greek, it says Sabbath of Sabbaths, as in this is an almighty Sabbath, like the big one, like the one you should have fear and trembling of, because this is Judgment Day. It's only the most important, impactful, devastating day the earth will ever know. So this is a big deal, the big, big one that we ought to, be serious and solemn about our own sin, and we need to respect and have awe and reverence for this Sabbath of Sabbaths, right? That's the so in Greek it's Sabbath of Sabbaths. The plural there doesn't mean it's not meaning every single Sabbath. So it shouldn't be construed so as to make the meaning of that verse dictating that that's when every Sabbath begins, because that's not. If that were the case, it had said it at the beginning. So this is a big point that I guess a lot of people want to disagree on. I truthfully don't understand why. Um, but but let's get back to your video and carry on with the feasts, because this is the point that I'm trying to make. That this all lines up. And let's and so I'll just hop back and forth between this graphic and your video and kind of plug in the verses as we go.
So let's go to the feast days. The feast days of Yahweh, in my opinion, puts the whole argument to rest. This is where my foundation is as to where I am rooted in this understanding of either evening to evening or morning to morning. So this is the concrete foundation that I am standing on, and I'll explain where I'm at. So Yahweh is not an author of confusion, but of clear and concise instructions. Prophecy, parables, those may be hidden or sometimes hard to understand. Conversely, in my experience, when it comes to keeping his commandments, they are straightforward. After all, if they weren't easy to understand, how can he hold us accountable? It's got to be simple for anyone, even the layman, to understand. Hey, I got to keep Sabbath. Hey, I got to do this. I got to do that. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't be so hard to understand that the simple person couldn't understand what to do. So again, if it wasn't easy to understand, how can he hold us accountable? This is how I believe he has treated the subject of counting a day and ultimately how and when to keep his festivals and weekly Sabbaths, which is the ultimate goal of this study. The ultimate goal of this study is to figure out if we need to be keeping all the feast days and his Sabbaths evening to evening or morning to morning. Plus, we need to know how to count the days if we want to get it right on the same day as well. So this is why it's part of the calendar series that we're doing. So let's look at.
So I just wanted to reiterate here real quick that the appointed times are they take place when they are defined to take place. So if it's on a day, it'll be at the beginning of that day, or if it's at a particular time of day like sunset, it'll start, or evening, it'll start at evening. Um, that's the point here.
Look at Passover and unleavened bread, which is really just one big festival. It is counted as two feast days, but Passover is part of unleavened bread. The Passover meal is the first eating of unleavened bread. So these are the feasts of Yahweh, even holy convocations, which ye shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even or evening is Yahweh's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work there. And that's Leviticus 23, 4 through 7. So here we see two important facts we must not overlook. Yahweh commanded his feast days to be kept starting at evening, or at least this feast day starting at evening. So we'll go with that, right? Forgive me for saying his feast days, all of them, right? So I'm not implying that yet. So he told us here to keep this feast, which is the first one of the year, at evening. What you will never find is one single command to keep any feast day or Sabbath starting at morning. You won't find it. You won't find a command. Again, reviewing the evidence.
Right, right. You won't find a command saying that because when the commands say to deviate from the precedent that was set, it will tell you exactly which ones deviate, which would be Passover uh, uh, and uh, and atonement, and I think trumpets. I need to read that one. Um,
For morning to morning, there's a ton of scriptures that kind of allude to the next day starting at morning, and we'll get to some of those. In fairness, we need to look at some of those. I really do. But what we're looking at now is straightforward Torah commandments. Do this. This is how it's done. Not like, well, because this verse said this and this, then that makes me think it's morning. This is straightforward commandment. So bear with me. This is not to be taken lightly. So what we're talking about is there's not one command to keep anything morning to morning. This is not to be taken lightly, as he is a consistent Elohim and changes not. Also, we see that the feast of unleavened bread is to be kept 7 days. This isn't 7 12-hour daylight periods. This is 7 24-hour periods. So 7 full days, a whole week. So when he gives us the instructions of how to keep it, how to keep the 7 days, we can be assured that this is how we count 7 days. I'll explain more in a moment. 7 days you shall eat matzah, that's unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the 7th day, that soul shall be cut off from Yasharel. And in the first day there shall be a holy assembly, and in the 7th day there shall be a holy assembly to you. No manner of work shall be done in them, save that which every man must eat. That only may be done of you. And you shall guard the feast of matzah, unleavened bread. For in the self same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore shall you guard this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat matzah until the 21st day of the month at evening. So he said, you're going to eat unleavened bread from evening on the 14th to evening at the 21st. So did you catch that? Yahweh just told us how to count 7 days. Think about it. Here's the scripture again. 7 days you shall eat matzah. And in the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat matzah until the 21st day of the month at evening. Yahweh just instructed us in his Torah that 7 days are counted from the 14th day at evening to the 21st day at evening. This cannot be understated. If you were hoping for a set of verses or a verse that just makes the whole argument simple to understand or an aha moment, it's right there. I'm telling you, it's right there. It's been right there the whole time for us. Let me just break it down a little bit slowly. So,
there's 7 days if you start from 15. It's 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. If you start from 14, you would end on the evening, I guess, of the 20th, I think. Um, Passover is an early beginning, but it is a separate feast because it happens on a different day. It happens on the evening of the day before, and there's no break in between. So you continue right on into the first day of unleavened bread, and you continue eating matzah because matzah was ordered for Passover and unleavened bread. So So you're eating matzah for 7.5 days, like starting at evening. So it's not exactly a half, but um, yeah.
Yahweh said to eat unleavened bread 7 days, 7 full 24-hour periods. And he just told you what 7 full days or 7 24-hour periods looks like. It's from the 14th month at evening to the 21st month at 21st day at evening. That's 7 days. Period. I could literally end the study right here, but there's a ton more to go over. But again, that if you're wondering where my sure footing is, like if this is a house built with footers and with a concrete slab, that's the concrete slab I'm standing on right now because Yahweh just told you plain as day what 7 days looks like and how it's counted. Let's look at the visual. Sometimes visuals, they say a picture is worth, 1,000 words. Let's look at the visual of this. So again, 7 days unleavened bread. So remember the commandment: 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Even the first day you shall put away leaven out of your houses. For whosoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh, that soul shall be cut off from Israel. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 1 and 20th day of the month at evening. So that's Exodus 12, 15, and 18. So here we go. So this is looking at it. We're gonna look at it from a morning perspective and an evening to evening perspective, both with the visual charts. Okay. So this is a perspective of this is the 14th day. So nighttime then daytime. 15th nighttime then daytime. So it goes all the way through. So what we read was the 14th day at evening, and the evening hours are the wee little hours that separates the daytime and the nighttime. It's just it's a separation. We'll talk more about that in a second. So he's telling us to keep the feast of unleavened bread from evening on the 14th to the evening on the 21st. And you'll see it's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7. Easy, right? So it starts on the 14th at evening, it ends on the 21st at evening. No issues. So 7 days are shown to you from evening to evening. If there was no other evidence, this alone would be enough to stand in court. It would. But there's more to cover. When is the Passover meal to be eaten, and when does unleavened bread start? And you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And this is talking about the Passover lamb. So it told you to take it out, select it on the 10th day, and you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole multitude of the assembly of Yisrael shall kill it in the evening, and they shall take of the blood and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper door posts of the houses wherein they shall eat it. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and matzah, unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs shall they eat it. Exodus 12, 6 through 8. So order of events. Take the Passover lamb on the 10th. You keep it until the 14th at evening, right before it gets dark. You kill it. You put the blood on the doorposts and you eat it that night. You don't wait for some other day. You eat it that very night. Otherwise, the meat goes bad and all that kind of stuff. So the Passover meal is to be eaten at night. This also begins the feast of unleavened bread, as the meal commands it to be eaten. As the meal commands it, which is unleavened bread, to be eaten alongside the lamb. Unleavened bread starts on the 15th day of the first month.
So I almost agree. I think I have done a clear job of explaining that Passover is its own feast, and then directly and immediately followed by unleavened bread. No interruptions. There's unleavened bread with Passover and unleavened bread with the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So I mean, it's commanded. It says you shall eat the lamb and you shall eat unleavened bread. So matzah. Uh, you just keep on eating unleavened bread. It's like an early beginning. It's a bonus beginning, you know? So
In the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Leviticus 23, 5 through 6. So considering the Passover meal is to be eaten at night, and that meal is commanded to be eaten with unleavened bread, he just told us when the date changes from the 14th to the 15th at night during the Passover meal. If you didn't catch that, trust me, we'll go over it in just a second. Which is also, so he told us when the date changes from the 14th to the 15th at night during the Passover meal, which is also the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. The book of Jubilees makes it clearer for us to see. Remember the commandment which Yahweh commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th of the first month, that you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of the 15th from the time of the setting of the sun. That's Jubilees 49:1. So you're killing the Passover here, and you're eating it here. And Jubilees just told you you're eating it on the night of the 15th. Just tells you.
okay, real quick, this evening of the 15th. So this is what I was trying to bring up when I was showing you the Jubilees chapter 49 verse I think it's 11. Yes. That is that which Yahuwah commanded you, that you should observe it between the evenings. So this Passover is happening between, so here on this graph, here are the evenings. It's the evening of the day, the evening of the day, which is Areb, where day becomes night, and then, quote, evening, the other evening, which would be the evening of the night, which makes night day, which is called Boker. That's the morning. That's the title given to this evening. But between these two evenings, in no period of daylight, so all night, right? up until the early hours of the morning, just before the sun comes up, is when you would stop, because that's, as I showed earlier, that's what it says here. Anything that remains until the morning, burn it. So uh, that fits here. See, the day begins. The sun has not risen quite yet, but it's about to. Just like Mary, the two Marys going to the tomb, they rose early in the morning, after the Sabbath, but the Sabbath had ended right there at approximately about 4 a.m. in the morning. So so at that point, it's fine for them to go visit the tomb. And they rush to see if Yahusha's there, and he's already risen. At the time they get there, the sun starts rising, and he has already risen. So at some point before this point, which I would say was at the beginning of that day, which was right at the end of the second part of the night, which was so so. I digress. So let's go back.
Told you that the date changed from evening on the 14th to night as the 15th.
Real quick, if I didn't make it clear, if I missed it, um, up here when it says the 15th, right here in verse 1, eat it by night on the evening of the 15th. It's the eve of the 15th. You see, we kind of have a saying in English. Obviously, they have one here in Hebrew. Um, it's the evening preceding the 15th. The 15th, it's Boker is when it's. I can see what you're trying to. All right. Anyway, back to the video.
So Jubilees just confirmed what the Torah already instructed. The date changed after sunset and when evening came. Now, let's take a look at the visual aid we use for the 7 days of unleavened bread, but from a sunrise to sunrise perspective. So here we have a flip. So now we have, let's say this would be morning, evening, night. So this is a 24-hour day here. So this is the 14th, this is the 15th, 16th, so on and so forth, all the way. So here, if from a morning to morning perspective, so again, on the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread, and the 1 and 20th until the 1 and 20th day, so the 21st day of the month at evening. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So the commandment is to start eating unleavened bread at the 14th at evening. Okay, so again, if day is first, then night. So here's the evening on the 14th, right? There's a problem here. I'll explain it to you. So you can still count 7 days. That's no problem. You can still count 7 days, right? But we have a problem now. The command is to eat unleavened bread for 7 days. Exodus 12:18 tells us to be.
So this is an additional command on top of the one that was preceded by it, that preceded it, which was the command for Passover, which happens immediately before. We're given the instruction for Passover, and then immediately afterward we're given the instruction for unleavened bread. And the instruction for unleavened bread is that you eat unleavened bread for 7 days. But that's the instruction for unleavened bread. We had already received the instructions for Passover just before this point. So you should draw the line right here at before the morning of the 22nd. Just add an extra 12 hours, because there's 12 additional hours of this appointed time, which is 7.5 days almost. So
Begin eating unleavened bread at evening on the 14th, but then Leviticus 23:6 tells us the festival of unleavened bread begins on the 15th. We have roughly a 12-hour gap discrepancy with the sunrise theory circled in red above. So here again, what I'm telling you, this is what I'm trying to tell you. So you're supposed to eat unleavened bread here. So the Feast of Passover starts unleavened bread. So we're eating that here. If sunrise to sunrise is correct, we're eating that here. But if the date doesn't change until the morning here, so if the 15th doesn't start here, you have a 12-hour gap issue between what the commandment is telling you. Because if morning to morning were true, this wouldn't make sense, because it's contradicting one another. It's telling you to eat unleavened bread for 7 days starting here, but then it's telling you that unleavened bread doesn't start here. It just doesn't work. So remember what Jubilee said. Remember the commandment which Yahweh commanded you concerning the Passover, that you should celebrate it in its season on the 14th day of the first month, that you should kill it before it is evening, and that they should eat it by night on the evening of the 15th from the time of the setting of the sun. So per the sunrise theory, they would have to wait 24 hours after killing the Passover lamb on the evening of the 14th and eat it on the evening of the 15th. This is impossible, as the commandment also tells us to burn any remains before it is morning. So what I'm trying to say is, if you kill the Passover here, and then you're not supposed to eat it until the evening of the 15th, and so now we're talking about here, you've got a 24-hour gap between when you kill it and when you eat it, if the 15th started here in the morning, which I'm here to say I don't believe it does. Remember, the remains were to be burnt in the morning. So if we're killing it here in the evening, all the remains are to be burnt by here, and then there's no way you could eat it on the 15th of the first month. This is that which Yahweh commanded thee, that thou shouldst observe it between the evenings. This is the Passover. And that it is not permissible to slay it during any period of the light, but during the period bordering on the evening, and let them eat it at the time of the evening until the third part of the night. And whatever is left over of all its flesh from the third part of the night and onwards, let them burn it with fire. And that's Jubilees 49:11 through 12. So the truth is, the 15th day of the month began at night. After the sunset, the evening was over. And so again, just to go back to the correct chart, the correct visual, they killed it here. So nighttime then daytime. So evening before it changed over the 15th. They were killing it here on the 14th and eating it by night on the 15th and burning the remains before the morning came on the 15th. There's more to this, much more. So now let's look at them, the Israelites leaving Egypt. And you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in the self same day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. So this self same day is talking about in the same 24-hour period. It's not talking about a period of light, because as we'll find out here shortly, they came out by night. So if he's talking about on the self same day, it's contradicting itself. So he's talking about from the self same 24-hour period, I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall you observe it in your generations by an ordinance forever. So we know already that the Feast of Unleavened Bread starts on the 15th day of the first month, and Exodus 12:17 just stated that they left Egypt the same day, the same 24-hour period. Even putting aside the evidence the word just showed us a moment ago, consider this. The timeline leaving Egypt is as follows. They kill the Passover at evening on the 14th day of the first month. They eat the Passover that night after the sun went down. The firstborn are slain at night, the same night. Pharaoh commands that they leave hastily that same night. They leave at night. Deuteronomy 16:1 we'll read.
Yes, they leave at night, at the second part of the night. Let me just pull up this. They leave at the second part of the night, just as we're approaching this dividing line into the third part of the night, which is called morning. And at that point, as you read earlier, the angel does say that this very day Yahuwah took you by the hand and led you out of the land of Egypt.
Read in just a second. This would confirm that the date changed from the 14th of the first to the 15th that night after the sunset ended. Take a look. I'll explain. And it came to pass that at midnight, Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt. Let's pause. Remember, this happened that same night that they killed the Passover lamb and put the blood of the doorpost to protect their household from the slayer to come in and to kill their firstborn son. It wasn't they killed it that night and the blood remained 24 hours until the next night. No, it was the same night. So, and it came to pass that at midnight, Yahweh smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne into the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. And he called from Moshe and Aharon by night, so it's still night, and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve Yahweh as you have said. Also, take your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, We be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their kneading troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. So everything was night, night, night. Firstborn was slain at midnight. Pharaoh rose up at midnight. He called for Moshe and Aaron by midnight, and had them leave by night. Observe the month of Abib, and keep the Passover unto Yahweh your Elohim. For in the month of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you forth out of Egypt by night. He didn't bring them out in daytime. I'll explain why this is important. So with this evidence, it should be easy to conclude that the Israelites left Egypt that same night when they were eating the Passover, which was the 15th day of the month per the scriptures. By this we know that a day changes at nighttime after the sun goes down. Remember, and you shall observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we've already confirmed is on the 15th day of the first month. I'll read it one more time for you in a second. You shall observe the Feast of Unleavened Bread, for in this self same day, which we know he brought them out by night, so the self same 24-hour period, have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore, you shall observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. Exodus 12:17. Remember, in the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Passover, and on the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Unto Yahweh 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So just to recap, unleavened bread is the 15th day of the first month. The same day at night they left Egypt. They didn't wait a 24-hour period before being cast out. They killed the Passover before sunset on the 14th. The blood on the doorpost. The blood on the door protected them that night, and they were sent in haste the same night, the 15th. Now let's take a look at the Day of Atonement.
So I just wanted to highlight in the graphic I have here that they kill the Passover at Ereb. So during this time window, at the point where the sun sets, that's when they'll slay it, and then they'll prepare it. For it takes time to prepare a freshly slaughtered lamb, and you're gonna need to cook it, and then eat it, and then you're supposed to eat it prepared to leave with sandals on your feet and all this. The cry comes out around midnight or at midnight. So if that's maybe here, how long did it take for Pharaoh to realize what happened and to send the guards to find Moses and bring him to the palace and give him the order to leave? Or did he not summon him back? Did he just send send a guard with the order to just tell him to leave? I think he sent him back. I think he summoned him back. Um, uh, Regardless, they had to pack up their things, and it says that they also looted Egypt because all the people who were in Egypt wanted them gone, and I guess had given them a bunch of valuable stuff so that they would leave. Um, how I don't know how long that approximately took, but I'm sure by the time they set out, the sun hadn't risen yet. It was still night, but I'm seeing that these events fit within this window to have them be leaving perhaps on the third part of the night or set out of city limits second part of the night and then reach the edge of the country by third of the night. So you're walking for a while. So I can see how the verse still fits here because that very day he led you out, the 15th would be the third part of the night. By night, on that day he led you out. I feel like it still fits here. Um, so we'll go on to your next point.
Atonement. Once again, we find ourselves on a subtopic within this debate that both sides use for their argument. I will simply share how I understand the Day of Atonement at this time. Here's the commandment. Also, on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you, and you shall afflict your souls, and offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and you shall afflict your souls. In the 9th day of the month, at even, from even unto even, shall you celebrate your Sabbath. So here, this is actually a really important passage. So this is Leviticus 23, 27, and 32. So before we dissect this, here is a second witness to celebrating something Yahweh commanded in a manner of evening to evening. Straight up, he says, you're going to celebrate the Sabbath evening to evening. Again, not once do we see any command to celebrate anything from morning to morning, not even a whisper, right? Nothing. Let's see what this would look like, as some may say that because it is commanded from the 9th day at evening, that there's no way this would work from a perspective that the day is calculated from evening to evening. Sometimes a visual is very helpful, and I needed it myself because when people were explaining it, kind of debunking the evening to evening theory, I was like, huh. Okay, that is kind of different. Maybe you're onto something. And I put it on a visual here, and it made a whole lot of sense. So, Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls. From the 9th day of the month, from evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbaths. Leviticus 23:32. So, here's an evening to morning perspective, or nighttime to daytime perspective, which is where I'm at, as you can probably tell by now. So, here's the 9th day. So, nighttime, then morning, and here's those wee little hours of evening, right there, right before it becomes nighttime. So, he's telling you to celebrate on the 9th day at evening, from evening to evening. So, when you're celebrating it from here to here, that's the 10th day.
Now, the 10th day takes place, the 10th Yom, daylight hours, 12-hour day, does take place in this time window. But it does say that it begins on the evening of the 9th. So, if you're saying evening comes first, wouldn't it begin on the evening of the 9th, which would be first over here, and then finish on the evening of the on the 10th day, right? On the evening of the 10th. So I agree that this is exactly when it should be celebrated, starting at the evening and going to the next evening. But I will say that that's because it specifically says to do it this way, as opposed to the way you would normally do it, which would be start right here just before the sun rises at part 3 of the night, approximately 4 a.m., plus or minus an hour, depending on the season. So, I don't know. Once again, I feel like what you're saying fits here. And I'll just reiterate the precedent that is set by Enoch of when days start. So
I'll explain. Considering the evening is generally understood as the time from the sun setting to twilight, dark sky, it makes complete sense that he would command our Sabbath observance to start at that time, which is the changing of the day. If we start at nighttime, we may start late. So if you're starting already when it's nighttime, you could start 30 minutes late, 20 minutes late, whatever. But if we start at the time he designated, we will be on time for his appointment, which is what the feast days are after all. His feast days are appointed times. There are appointments with him and us. It's like, we've got an appointment with him. Do you want to be late? Side note, I was in the military. And you don't even need to be in the military to understand this. If you work for anybody, they want you to be on time, right? Bosses really like it if you're like 15 minutes early. In the military, if we were leaving somewhere, let's say we're going to go to the field or go to the range for the day, the shooting range, and we're leaving at 8 o'clock in the morning. Actually, we never left for anything at 8 o'clock in the morning. So let's say we're leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning. You weren't ready, and you didn't get in your spot at 6 in the morning. You were there at like 5:30 or like 5:45. So you're there early before it starts. That's just good habits. How much more for some of the most important things we may do in our life, which is to keep his commanded times. If that evening is that breaking point between a day, and so the day starts at evening, he would want us to start it on time. So I can go on that for a while, but I don't need to. So if the Day of Atonement is celebrated from the evening of the 9th, which is just minutes away from the nighttime, which starts the 10th, to the evening of the 10th, then the Sabbath is properly observed on the 10th day, the 24-hour period of the 10th day, as it is commanded. Let us not forget this is exactly the same pattern for the week of unleavened bread. It was commanded to be celebrated on the 15th day of the month. So Leviticus 23, and on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must keep unleavened bread. But let's not forget it was to begin at the 14th at evening. And the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 1 and 20th day of the month at evening. So it's the same pattern. It's the same thing. He's like, be 30 minutes early to my feast. That's pretty much what he's saying. So again, from an evening to evening perspective, you are celebrating the entire 24-hour period on the 10th day of the month. Simple as that. Yahweh is an Elohim of order. Both feasts are operated in the same way. So Feast of Unleavened Bread and the Day of Atonement. With these two witnesses, I would conclude that all feasts, including the weekly Sabbath, are to be observed in an evening-to-evening fashion, to which it is also the changing of the calendar day. While testing the sunrise-to-sunrise teachings, they would imply that these feasts alone are commanded evening to evening because they were different, as in it was universally understood that morning to morning was for everything else. I have an issue with that. So herein lies the problem. You can't find any commandment anywhere to keep any holy day from morning to morning. Nothing. Zip. Nothing. I have a problem with that. Yahweh is very clear and very concise on what he does. So nothing, not even one command, not even a whisper. What we do have are two witnesses in favor of evening to evening, and I believe Yahweh gave us the example to follow for all. Let us take a look at the Day of Atonement from a sunrise to sunrise perspective. So now I flipped it. So now you have daytime, then nighttime, daytime, then nighttime. So this is okay. So again, same thing. Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls from the ninth day of the month. From evening to evening, you shall keep your Sabbaths. Leviticus 23:32. So here you have the ninth day. The ninth day, and from a sunrise to sunrise perspective, you have the ninth day, you have the light, and then the darkness. Right. So this is the ninth day. This is the 10th day. So if we go the ninth day at evening to the 10th day at evening, now you got a problem. Now you're celebrating half on the 9th and half on the 10th. It wouldn't hold true to celebrating on the 10th day of the month. Let me explain. So
You see, it just depends on the definition of the word yom. There's two definitions, like you said. Is the definition the 12-hour yom or the 24-hour yom? So yes, you do. It's true to say you celebrated all day on the 10th. But it specifically says you start it on evening of the 9th. It doesn't say start it. Why does it say start it at evening at the 9th? Why doesn't it just say, well, just do it on the 10th day? Like just like every day begins at evening. Just start it when normal. What's the point of having the express instruction begin at evening? There's no point in it. The point in it is to be the marker that lets you know that this is unique and different from what you normally do. When you normally begin the day at the morning before the sun comes up. So there's plenty of other examples in the Bible I could use that aren't feast days where people are talking and doing things and planning things that happen. So I hope I've been clear on this point.
if morning to morning is correct, then half of this holy day is celebrated on the 9th and half on the 10th. So yeah, I mean, that's just really it. So he would say, I mean, it would be more proper and more clear for him to say, if morning to morning was generally understood and that was just it, he would say half of this feast day you'll celebrate on the 9th day of the month, from evening time to evening time on the 10th day of the month. So half of the day is on half of this 24-hour period. When you say day, you can, again, when you say day, you can get confused because day can either mean a 24-hour period or a 12-hour period of light. So if he's telling us to celebrate on the 10th day of the month, well then, from a morning to morning perspective, you're only celebrating during half of the 10th day, half of the 24-hour period of the month on the 10th day, if that makes sense.
I agree, and I don't think that's a problem. I feel like that's what's instructed, and because that's what's instructed, that's what's correct.
So again, here's the morning to morning perspective and what it looks like. Here's the evening to evening perspective and what it looks like. Whereas here, the entire 10th day of the month, you're celebrating the Day of Atonement, making it true that on the 10th day of the month is the Day of Atonement. So one last note on the feast days before we move on. The Septuagint renders this translation to the Day of Atonement. It shall be a holy Sabbath to you, and you shall humble your souls from the 9th day of the month. From evening to evening shall you keep your Sabbaths.
I mentioned this earlier. In the Greek, it says It says Sabbath of Sabbaths. Um, so it's not plural Sabbaths. It's really important Sabbath. So
Plural. So while this is just an interpretation, I get it. I think they got it right with making Sabbaths plural. Again, considering no evidence exists for the contrary. When I say evidence, again, there is evidence that makes it look like the next 24-hour day or next calendar day starts at the morning. I get that. I really do. I really see that. I do. And I'm going to go over some of those. But again, what I'm standing here as on concrete ground is what the Torah just told us. Again, going back to the Feast of Unleavened Bread, he told you how to count 7 days. It started.
And I think the key to this understanding is separating the understanding of appointed times, that we observe things when they are dictated to us to observe them, on the time that's set to them, that Yahuwah chose the time. And he doesn't have to do an entire day, that we can have a 24-hour day that began before the sun came up at Boker, and that we can also have Sabbaths that begin at certain times of the day and may or may not take, include the entire day. So,
From the evening of the 14th to the evening of the 21st. He said that that's 7 days. If morning were to be correct, then he would have said from morning to morning is 7 days. But that's just not how. That's not what he said. So some verses to consider, and these really are ancillary. Really, my case for evening to evening was just put forth for you. There's actually a lot more to go. I think we're halfway through. My case was just put forth. What I feel is the solid ground is what I just shared with you with the feast days and the two witnesses that those provide. Now we're going to go over some other things. And it came to
okay, for the sake of the length of this video, since my commentary has to be put on top of yours and it doubles the length, for the sake of everyone who watches this, including you, I hope, um, this was your thesis, and I wanted to just compare it in light of um, this presentation, and hopefully you'll look at it. I really hope you will. Um, and I can get more detailed about the calendar, or about the calendar day. Um, but I do think that this is correct. I feel like every single verse, it's not most verses. I do feel like it's every single verse, um, fits within the boundaries of uh, this graph here, this graphic. Um, so I do think that the next stage for this would be to use this when studying the Dead Sea Scrolls, especially uh, the I forget the name specifically. I've got the book, but where the priesthood in Dead Sea Scrolls record the the uh, the eclipses. I think it is the solar and lunar eclipses. No, no. What they're recording is full moons and new moons. That's what they're doing. Um, the next thing I would want to do with this graphic would be to compare the sightings of the new moon and the full moons that are written in the Dead Sea Scrolls by the priests who wrote them there, and on the on the just compare to I would compare the days that they wrote that they saw the sightings of the full moons and the new moons, on which day that was, because it doesn't line up. But I wonder if it will line up with this reckoning, because it kind of starts about 4 a.m. Um, and depending on the days, according to Enoch, because this would fluctuate. And this is the picture of the equinoxes. It would be longer in the summer. I suppose it would be 4 parts of the day and 2 parts of the night in the summer. And then in the winter, there would be 2 parts of the day and 4 parts of the night. And that would be the opposite in the outskirts of the earth. So, okay, so I figured I'd add this last bit here. So, when I was reading Jubilees and discovered this uh, and compared it to Exodus and started to explore it, there were really two people um, that I had in mind to share it with, and unfortunately, I can't say that I'm satisfied with how things went with the first person, but um, I'm hoping for perhaps a different outcome this time. Um, so, you know, so I'll reach out to you publicly on YouTube just because this is how I do things. You know, open source is everyone, equal access, equal thing. So I do understand where certain things should be talked behind closed doors, but this is a very public subject. So um, I don't see any issue with posting this on YouTube. So I don't do Facebook because of communists, but um, I don't know if you're there. I'm gonna try to contact you over email. Um, but so if I can ask you to just consider this, kind of just go through it, understand what it is that I'm proposing or highlighting, um, and I hope I hope you see something to this, and I hope it motivates you to look into the subject.